everyone, my name's Rachel. I'm one of the naturalists here at Woodlake Nature Center. Today for our creature feature, we are actually going to be talking about dragonflies and damselflies. Now they're really cool insects for you to be able to try to find. You can find them in your yard, you can find them at a local park, a marsh, just like Woodlake, our prairies. They're all kinds of fun to try to go out and catch. Now earlier this week when we did our Life Cycles puppet show, we talked about, Sierra and Paul talked about the different life cycles. Now, dragonflies and damselflies are part of the order Odonta, and they actually go through incomplete metamorphosis. So unlike the butterfly that when they emerge from their egg, they are a little larva and then go into a pupa stage or a chrysalis and then emerge as an adult with their wings intact and everything, ready to go and fly. Dragonflies and damselflies go through incomplete metamorphosis, which means that when they emerge from their eggs, they actually come out and are in a nymph form. A nymph is it's kind of an in-between stage of a chrysalis and a pupa and a larva. And they live in that form until they grow big enough, and eventually they crawl out onto land and crack open their skin and just out they go. And then they wait for their wings to dry, and then they fly off and lay more eggs and eat all kinds of things like mosquitoes and such. Super, super cool. Now today I actually have caught a couple damselflies and dragonflies for you guys to see. I also have a couple of the nymphs in there. If you want to go and check and go and find them on your own, we actually have this in our links and our references and such. This is a key for pond study, so you can find all the different types of critters that might be living in your lake or your pond or even in your local park, a body of water. So you can try to identify the nymphs or the other types of insects that might be living in the water. Once they get to be an adult, you can absolutely try to get a net. And when you get a net, you can go and try to catch some dragonflies, which is super fun. I've been doing it a lot today. So we're actually going to transfer over, and so you guys can see these guys up close. We have some cool species for you to see. All right, so our first dragonfly that we're going to see today, it has a really complicated name, okay? It has a white face, and if you look on its abdomen, it's really long abdomen. It has a dot right in the middle. So its name is a dot-tailed white face. Now, if you look really carefully, it has 3 different body parts. Here is its head. I'm holding its wings, which are attached to its thorax, and then its long abdomen is where it breathes. These guys are voracious eaters, which means that they go around and they eat just about anything that they can catch. One thing that we'll see if it works out, I don't want to injure it in any way. This little dude has 6 legs, which helps tell me that it is an insect, along with its 3 parts. You can see it has wings it has 4 wings, so everything's in a pair, and all those veins are actually its blood pumping through its whole body. Now, one way you can tell a dragonfly from anything else is the fact that when it sits down, its wings lay flat. Now, these guys aren't going to be as flat because I've been holding them, and I've actually had them in a jar for a little while. These guys are also really cool because they have compound eyes right up front. There are a bunch of different lenses that allow it to create a much bigger picture, which allows, because it does have predators, it helps it not only catch its own food, but it allows it to see any predators that might be coming its way. Now I'm going to let go of this guy, and he might fly away, which is totally fine. It's been cooped up for a little while. These are pretty common to find throughout Minnesota. Seems pretty chill on my finger here. These guys are really common to find here in Minnesota, and especially here at Wood Lake Nature Center. It can be really, really tough to catch a dragonfly, but I highly recommend you go and try. It's a lot of fun. If you do catch a dragonfly, you want to make sure that you are very careful, because you don't want to damage its wings or its legs or anything, so that way it can go on to lay its eggs and continue on its way. All right. Now for a different dragonfly, this dragonfly is actually slightly larger than the other one. They do come in various colors and shapes, and there's different species. In Minnesota, I'm gonna put my hand away here, we can watch him move if he wants to. In Minnesota, there's about 151 different species of dragonfly and about 42 damselfly species. So that's quite a few different species of just this one little insect. This particular species is called a chalk-fronted porpoise. Now, there's lots of different dragonfly species. The most common one that a lot of people see are blue or green. They tend to be fairly large. Those are blue or green darners. They are a different species of dragonfly. Now this guy, as you can see, he is slightly different. The colors are different, as well as some of the patterning on his wings are slightly different, and he's larger. Now he still has the same body parts. He still has a head, a thorax, an abdomen, as well as 6 legs and compound eyes. Now those are all things that tell me that this is an insect. Now the 2 different types of dragonflies that I've shown you were 2 different sizes. When they first started coming around and were first evolving about 300 million years ago, the Earth was much different. We had about, there was about 30% more oxygen in the air. So that allowed these dragonflies, or their ancestors, to actually be much larger than they are today. Now this is a pretty large dragonfly that I'm holding. Now imagine if this dragonfly, instead of being this size, was about 3 feet long. That's about how big they were 300 million years ago. Scientists think that it's a combination of the fact that there was more oxygen in the air, as well as there weren't any birds yet. So they didn't really have any predators to eat them. Once those larger flying animals started to evolve, then it caused more of these insects to actually decrease in size. Again, we're gonna see if this guy will let me have its wings open and will stay here, and if not, he'll just fly away. These guys are extra cool because we talked about how they were called Ordonta. Their order is called Ordonta. That means that that means toothed. Their jaw actually they have a mandible that opens and allows them to reach out and get whatever insect they might be trying to eat, or whatever their food is. Generally speaking, that tends to be mosquitoes, so these guys are great. If you don't like mosquitoes, you better love some dragonflies. Woo, I'm sorry, my friends. You can see how its wings are folded flat and not holding itself across its body. We'll look at the damselflies in contrast. These guys are pretty darn cool. Ooh. Unfortunately, it's pretty windy today, so that means that there aren't a ton of dragonflies flying around right now because it can be a little rough on their wings. So this is a damselfly. This particular one is a bluet. Just like the dragonfly, it is in the Odonta family. I said earlier there are about 42 species of damselfly in Minnesota. We're still trying to figure out all of them. As you can see, there are still 3 different body parts: a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. Unlike the dragonflies from before, you can see that its abdomen is actually much more flexible than that of the dragonfly. They are also much smaller, and if you look, its abdomen, let's see if we can do this here, their abdomen is actually much thinner than the dragonfly. They are much smaller species of in the Odonta family order, I suppose. This particular one is a bluet. It's a very common species you can find here at Wood Lake or even around your yard. These guys are fairly common and they're everywhere, man. They're super cool though. These particular damselflies, as you can see, when I rested the when I had the dragonfly on my hand, they had their wings spread out flat, whereas the damselfly, as well as being smaller, their wings are actually folded across its back. They still have the same number of wings. There are 4 wings. However, they are folded alongside its back, which is one way that you can tell a dragonfly from a damselfly. All right. Now, unlike the bluet, another species that you might find here in Minnesota, another type of damselfly once more, it's called an eastern forktail. Now, this one's also pretty common to be able to see. As you can see, it's a bright green. It has some black lines going up its thorax as well as around its compound eyes and its head. And then if you look at the very, very end of its abdomen here, it has a bright blue spot on its abdomen. Now, this is called an eastern forktail. If you look really, really closely, the very, very end, its tail or its abdomen actually comes into a type of fork. And that's part of the reason why they're called the way they are. It is a really common species for you to be able to find here in Minnesota as well. If you don't find a bluet, you're probably going to be finding these guys. He's been in a jar for a little while, so he's a little disoriented. Again, just like its bluet cousin, its wings are folded over its back. A telltale sign that it is a damselfly. Now, what I can tell you about this particular toad, or tadpole, that it is an American toad tadpole. And if you look, it's starting to get its back legs, which means that it's not going to be a tadpole for much longer. Now I'm going to put him back in the bucket and we're going to see what else we have in this pond study here. Let him swim around. There is also a crayfish in here. Let's see if I can catch them. They're pretty quick. Now these guys, once they hatch from an egg, they look pretty much the same from an egg to their adult form. They just grow bigger and bigger and shed their exoskeleton. So very similar to humans, very similar to reptiles and trees even. So this is pretty cool to be able to see. Now let's see. All right. Now I know you guys have a bit of a clue based on what we've been talking about today, but what do you guys think this is? Does it remind you of anything? Do you see the 6 legs? What does that tell you? This, if you guessed that this is a Dragonfly Nymph, you would be correct. Now this guy is much larger than the Damselfly Nymph, which we will see in just a minute. These guys are one of the kings of the pond. They will eat anything and everything. One cool thing about Minnesota is as a nymph, they do live in the pond and they stay there once they have emerged from an egg, and eventually once they get large enough, they crawl out onto land, onto a stick or a leaf, and they emerge from this form into their adult form, which you guys, I'm sure, are much more familiar with, what a dragonfly looks like. Now, this dude is relatively smallish, so he probably has a little while longer left to go in the pond. A lot of dragonflies, and in some cases some damselflies, they will actually stay in the water for up to 5 years. Now, one crazy thing that happens in Minnesota is the fact that they actually stay alive through the winter, because we freeze, our lakes tend to freeze in the wintertime. Now they do a type of hibernation just like a lot of other animals do, and they will stay in the water and wait until it warms up, and eventually they will emerge and continue on with their life cycle. One really interesting thing is the fact that unlike their adults, these guys are breathing water. Dragonflies do breathe air just like we do, but these guys are taking in the oxygen from the water, which is what any animal that lives in the water will do, that breathes water. They're taking in the water and sorting out the oxygen through their gills. Now this guy is doing that through their abdomen. That is where their gills or their eventual lungs are. Alright, put him back. Now let's see if we can find a damselfly nymph so that you guys can see both. They are much smaller and are easier to hide. As you can see, this is much smaller than our dragonfly nymph. This is a damselfly nymph. I challenge you guys to find similarities and differences between the two. And please tell us what you find different, what you find similar. These guys are very similar in the fact of that they are a nymph stage. So these are breathing water. You can see those 3 tail-like appendages at the end of its body. Those are its gills. So they have external gills, which is pretty unusual for aquatic species. So they filter their water and their oxygen through those external gills and bring it back into the rest of its body. Just like the dragonflies, they will crawl out once they're ready and crawl out, find a stem or a leaf, and then emerge into their adult form. Hey guys, Rachel's still here. Just like the last 2 weeks here at Wood Lake Nature Center, where you've been able to go and use our nets to explore our pond and do some pond dipping of your own. The next 2 weeks, starting July 6th, we will have insect nets out for you to be able to explore our prairies. Now, what you're going to do, this will happen starting July 6th, Monday, Thursday, and Saturday from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And then the nets will be brought back inside. What we ask for you to do, there's going to be 6 nets available for you all to borrow. You need to grab it from the handle Before you use it, it'll be sitting in a sanitizer solution. You take the handle, you rinse it off. Make sure you don't get the net wet, otherwise it won't be as easy for you to use. And then you are set to go. When you bring it back, make sure that you rinse it off and put it back in the sanitizer solution so that way the next person can be sure that it is as clean as they can. Make sure you wash your hands before and after, keeping with all of those guidelines. Now, when you go out to use these nets, I'm going to use a much bigger net. If you want to be able to catch some dragonflies or maybe even some other insects or maybe some spiders that are hanging out in our prairie. If you want to go along the edge of our prairies, that's totally fine. Try not to trample any of our plants because there are ticks and we want to make sure that everybody stays as safe as they can. You can always check after. What you want to do is you're going to take your net, just holding it by the handle, and then you're going to go in a figure 8. You're going to draw a nice little 8, just like you did with the pond nets. And then you want to, I'm going to show you that again. Figure 8, and then close your net so that way you can get right up close and open it up so that way you can see what you caught. Now, in that particular run through, I did not catch anything, but that's okay. That just means that I can empty it out of the grass and try again. I do see a damselfly. We'll close it up just like that. Open it up. See what you got. And let the insects fly out if they want to. And off you go. Thanks for joining us this week for our creature feature. Hope to see you around Wood Lake Nature Center.
Hi everyone, welcome to Wood Lake's story time. I'm Naturalist Paul and it's July and we're going to read Eliza and the Dragonfly by Susie Caldwell Reinhardt, illustrated by Anissa Claire Haveman. There's a dragonfly in my house. It flew in the window and landed on my toothbrush. I have to tell Aunt Doris. Cool toothbrush story. My Aunt Doris loves bugs and spiders and bees and ants. She uses words like magnificent when she sees things that sting and sore. Aunt Doris is an entomologist. That's somebody who studies insects. She loves to go to the pond near my house to watch bugs. Magnificent, Aunt Doris says when she sees the dragonfly in my house. This one belongs in the pond. So I hop on my bike and Aunt Doris hops on her bug sickle, which is fantastic. And we ride to the pond. The dragonfly holds on tight. I carry it like it is the most precious gift in the world. A great white egret wades silently through the lilies. Aunt Doris walks along the water's edge, holding her net high like a kite. Dragonflies zoom faster than birds over the smooth surface of the pond. My toothbrush dragonfly rushes to join them. Goodbye. I make a wish on every dragonfly I see. I wish I could fly as fast as a dragonfly. I wish I could ride my bike anywhere I wanted. I wish it didn't take so long to grow up. Kerploosh! Aunt Doris slips and falls in the pond. The great white egret pumps her wings and flies away. A frog hops out of Aunt Doris's pocket. Fish and leaves drip from her hair, but Aunt Doris doesn't mind. She never minds what she looks like. That's what I like about Aunt Doris. There's the frog. Then an awful green creature the size of a paperclip swims out of her boot. She scoops it into her hand. Ew, I say. Magnificent! Aunt Doris says. What is it? I ask. Well, it's a young dragonfly, Eliza, a nymph, Aunt Doris says as she lets the creature go. Well, what's a dragonfly doing underwater? I ask. Well, dragonflies begin their lives in water. When they're young, they breathe water instead of air, and they swim instead of fly. Let's make a water scope and you can see for yourself. Aunt Doris digs into her backpack and finds an empty juice container. She cuts off the top and the bottom. Then she takes the clean plastic wrap of her sandwich, or off her sandwich, and spreads it over the end of the container. A big rubber band holds the plastic wrap in place. Ta-da! A water scope! Aunt Doris shows me how to look through the scope underwater. Whoa, that's pretty cool. Wow, there's an amazing wiggling world down here, I gasp. Can you see the dragonfly nymph? I think so, but it doesn't look like a dragonfly. Where are its wings? I wonder. Look closer, Aunt Doris says. I see 4 tiny wings like flower petals folded on the dragon's back. When will it know how to fly? I ask. Eliza, Aunt Doris smiles. A dragonfly nymph doesn't worry about when it will grow up and become a dragonfly. It doesn't wish it could fly or be more beautiful than it already is. It just mucks about in the pond being itself. Then it wakes up one morning with wings. Well, all kinds of cool things underwater. So, every day after school, Aunt Doris and I go to the pond. We take turns looking through the water scope to find the dragonfly nymph. Aunt Doris wants to name it Bo because she thinks it's beautiful. I think it looks more like Horus. I wish I could see Horus hatch into a dragonfly. I wish I could watch Horus crawl up a log or a long blade of grass the way Aunt Doris says he will, unfold his wings and fly away. For now, he lies very still in the shallow water. Horus doesn't know how to fly. Horus has a gift, a lower lip 5 times the size of his head with giant hooks on the end. It tucks away neatly under a small insect, or until a small insect swims by. Then it's dinner time. Ooh, I say, magnificent, Aunt Doris says. There's an adult dragonfly right there, not Horus. Sometimes I bring my colored pencils and paper to the pond and draw Horus. He looks at me with half a smile on his face. I don't think dragonflies smile, but it's a fun thought. I tell Horus that soon he'll be able to breathe air instead of water. I tell him that soon he'll be able to fly faster than a swallow. And I tell him other things too, like how I wish I was taller and had straight blonde hair, and how I wish I could paint beautiful pictures that the whole world would come to see. Horus stares at me like he's trying to tell me something. But Horus still doesn't know how to fly. She's a good artist. Sometimes my friend Carlos and Annie come to the pond with me after school. Horus loves an audience. He glides around at the bottom of the pond as if he were dancing. Cha-cha, Horus. Carlos is teaching Horus to speak Spanish. Horus's eyes grow wide and it looks like he's listening really hard. Hola, Horus. Annie takes out her recorder and plays Horus a tune. Do, re, mi, Horus. But Horus still does not know how to fly. I'll bet he wishes he could fly, Annie says. Horus doesn't wish he could fly or be more beautiful than he already is, I say. Aunt Doris smiles. Oh no, Horus is gone, Carlos says when he lowers the scope into the water. Gone? Let me look, I say. Through the water scope, I see pollywogs and fish, but no Horus. I move the scope up and down and back and forth still. No Horus. Aunt Doris, where is he? Let's see where he went. Here he is. Aunt Doris waves us over excitedly. On a tall plant stem rising out of the water, Horus climbs out of the pond for the first time. What's happening? Asks Eliza. Horus is going to hatch, Aunt Doris whispers. We all lie down in the grass to watch. At first, nothing happens. The wind swings the stem back and forth. Horus holds on like it's the only solid thing in the world. Then he takes his first breath of air. It moves through his body and cracks his shell open. Slowly, so slowly, Horus slides out of his shell like he's slipping out of a sleeping bag. First his eyes appear, then his slender body, and finally, his wings. I hold my breath. He does not move. Horus's wings lie wrinkled across his back. Is he okay? I ask. Don't worry. He's pumping up and drying his wings. When it's time, he'll zoom away to get bugs for dinner, Aunt Doris says. Ew, Carlos says. Then the sun touches Horus's eyes, and we see that they are a brilliant green. The sun touches Horus's soft, wet wings, and they glow like they are made of tiny stained glass windows. Magnificent, Aunt Doris says. Ouch! Carlos slaps his neck and shouts, Mosquitoes! There are mosquitoes everywhere. They bite my ankles, they bite my arms, and they bite the soft places behind my knees. Ah, ouch. Carlos spins around in circles and falls down dizzy. Annie flaps her arms like she's trying to fly away. I shake my whole body like a wet dog, but the mosquitoes keep whining and buzzing. Suddenly, the buzzing stops. It is very quiet. No mosquitoes bite my knees. No mosquitoes bite my neck. There are hardly any mosquitoes at all. What do you think happened? Look, Carlos and Annie say at the same time. A liquid blue dragonfly with stained glass wings silences the pond, one mosquito at a time. Horus, Aunt Doris says. Magnificent, I say. That was a whole life cycle of a dragonfly, all in one short book. I hope you can get out sometime soon and look for any of those stages, either the nymph or those adult dragonflies, and maybe even get to see one emerge. It's always exciting. Good luck and have a great time.